This is what avoidants actually want to hear when you stop chasing them according to science. Now, before you is what I'm calling the avoidant boss. It's one of those 16-bit game bosses that you'd face back in the day. Now, this boss really isn't evil per se. It just shows up every time you hit a milestone in your relationship. It's got shields, it's got patterns, it's got hidden attacks that drain you fast if you don't know how to handle it. Now, most people come in swinging with the wrong strategy. They'll beg, or they'll chase, or they'll push for closeness. Those are the people that get wiped out by this boss. But today, well, I'm going to show you the cheat codes to beat this boss, and they all revolve around something that you're going to say. Okay, let's start with phase 1 of the fight, the shield of pressure. Now, the shield of pressure is pretty tough. Every time you try to step closer, the shield zaps you back with a jolt of resistance. In real life, this shows up the moment that an avoidant feels a relationship is escalating too quickly. Maybe you bring up labels, or you start talking about the future, or you just add a little bit more closeness than they're ready for. And that's when the fight or flight reflex screams, "This is too much, too fast, just get me away." So the real question here is, how do you break through? Well, since we all know that moving forward scares an avoidant, let's do the opposite. Instead, you're going to tell your avoidant, "Look, I'm good with how things are right now." Now, it sounds simple, but watch what happens. The shield flickers and then sort of drops. They lower their guard because they start to feel stable, and they feel safety from keeping things the way they are. Now, believe it or not, there's actually quite a bit of psychology behind it. Now, humans naturally lean toward this idea of a status quo. We prefer things to stay as they are instead of changing suddenly. And for avoidants, that instinct is supercharged. Safety for them equals no sudden moves. So by you saying you're fine with the way things are, you're deactivating the panic button in their brain. They stop bracing for escalation and start feeling safe to stay present with you. So yeah, that's phase 1. The shield of pressure only looks unbeatable until you realize the trick is not to push harder, but to step back and signal safety. Once the shield drops, you can start finally landing some real hits. Let's move on now to phase 2 of our boss battle, what I'm calling the timer attack. So just when you think you're safe, the boss switches tactics. Suddenly, this countdown clock flashes across the screen, and you're in the timer attack. Now, if you don't handle this one right, you're going to watch your progress slip away fast. So let's talk about what that looks like in real life. I had this client who went through this exact same thing. Let me set it up for you. So my client invites her avoidant boyfriend to meet her parents over the holidays. Now, for her, this is totally normal since they've been seeing each other and dating each other for over 10 months. Seemed like the right time to start meeting the parents. For the avoidant, though, this triggered his timer attack. He suddenly got too busy. He canceled the plans and went silent for days. So she emails me panicking, not knowing what to do. My advice was pretty simple. Give him space and tell him specifically, take your time. No, it obviously didn't work right away. But over time, something interesting begins to happen. That space stops being empty. It becomes breathable. For the avoidant, silence isn't punishment, it's often relief. It tells their nervous system, I'm not being chased, I'm not being trapped. By the way, that client that I'm telling the story about took advantage of the weekly group coaching that I offer in the Seiter Super Offer. And she's not the only one. Just last week on one of my live stream Q&As, I had the pleasure of getting this comment from Tiffany. "My fearful avoidant ex and I are now officially together. It's great. Thank you, Chris." So if you're interested in attending one of these live streams and you want to take advantage of our 50% discount that we have going right now, which gives you access to the weekly group coaching with me, full access to the community, as well as complete access to my course library, simply click the link in the description. All right, where were we? Yes. Talking about the merits of saying take your time. This is exactly what John Bowlby's secure base theory helps us understand. When people experience a secure base, someone who signals safety and patience, they can finally step out of the fight or flight mode. They don't feel the need to act defensively or control the situation. So in one study inspired by Bowlby's ideas, researchers observed children in a playroom scenario. Some children had a secure caregiver present, while others were left with a stranger or simply were left alone. When a new, exciting toy was introduced, the children with secure attachment were far more willing to explore and try it. The children without a secure base attachment in the room or a secure caregiver signaling safety and patience hesitated, froze, or clung despite the toy being objectively fun or perfect. But things get even better. I'd even argue that a huge aspect of this whole boss battle analogy I'm making is this idea of self-determination, which was popularized by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan. They basically showed that people thrive when they feel freedom and choice in how they act. They perform better, they feel safer, they're more motivated, they're more capable. So in their study, participants were asked to complete a task under two conditions. Some were given strict instructions and deadlines, while others had the freedom to choose the pace and order of their work. Those with autonomy stayed calm and engaged and curious and approached challenges with confidence. Meanwhile, participants without choice became tense and hesitant and even panicked, much like children without a secure base in the Bowlby study I just cited. Now, this goes to show that for avoidant individuals in particular, this freedom of timing matters even more. When they feel pressured or rushed, fight or flight instincts kick in, making it really hard for them to engage emotionally or make decisions. But when they're given space and control, they relax, they think clearly, and they're a lot more willing to participate. But we've gone pretty far off topic here. Let's move on to phase 3, the future shockwave. Okay, the way I see it is the future shockwave is a series of crossroads and choices. So let's say you've been with an avoidant for a few years now and want to determine how serious the relationship is. You can choose between asking, where is this going, versus, hey, we don't have to figure this out today. So let's say you choose, where is this going? Questions like, where is this going, will trigger avoidance because they collapse all time into this answer that you need right now. The right answer, of course, is choosing, we don't have to figure this out today. The shockwave that happens is neutralized when you buy breathing room for safety. This is even backed up a little bit in a concept called temporal construal theory, which shows people feel safer when the future is framed as distant. By delaying the decision, you diffuse the anxiety bomb, giving both of you more room to strategize calmly, which of course leads us to phase 4, the competence challenge. So as you continue to navigate the relationship, you'll inevitably encounter situations where the avoidant individual might feel scrutinized or controlled. Thus, they'll challenge you by testing your competence. Not competence in the resume sense, but the emotional competence. Can you hold your ground when they retreat? Can you give space without resentment? Can you stay calm instead of chasing or collapsing? You see, in their mind, every pullback is a way of asking, can you really handle me as I am without trying to control me? Now, at this point, you'll face another crucial choice. You can either option A, micromanage them and say, let me check every step you take. This is, again, like micromanaging. When you choose this, of course, it triggers defensiveness in the avoidant. Their power bar drops, their engagement plummets, and any progress you've made stalls. Think of it as game over, and you have to try again. Or you can try option B. I trust you to figure it out. This choice is a game changer. By expressing trust, you restore their sense of control and keep them engaged. The interaction moves forward smoothly because they feel capable and autonomous. Now, psychologically, this works because humans crave competence and autonomy. When you affirm their capability rather than threatening it, you boost their motivation, their confidence, and their willingness to engage constructively. But there's still one more phase we have to talk about. Phase 5, the distraction cloak. Right at this stage, the avoidant boss whips out the sneakiest move, the distraction cloak, which activates when you start hovering or checking in too much or watching their every move. The game will offer you two choices. You can either option A, say I'm watching everything you do, or option B, I've got my own mission to focus on, we'll deal with this later. So let's say you pick option A. What will happen is the boss will fade into emotional invisibility. So the more you hover, the less they engage until the connection stalls out completely and you get a game over. But if you revive and you have another chance and you choose option B, something different happens. By shifting the focus on your own life, you pierce the cloak. Independence sparks curiosity. The avoidant boss can't help but peek out, drawn in by the fact that you're no longer clinging for every ounce of their attention. So let's say you do all this stuff. You say everything that you are supposed to allow the avoidant to not be so triggered, but despite all your hard work, you still end up in limbo. Because a lot of times what people want is an honest relationship with avoidance. Well, that's where we really have to have a complex discussion about the fact that yes, cheat codes stop the boss fight from spiraling out of your control, but no, they don't win you the game of a real relationship. They just keep you from losing immediately in this moment. A few years ago, I got really suckered into this game called Hades, which is this game where you play as Zagreus, the son of Hades. Now, Zagreus is tired of the underworld, and all he wants to do is escape it and go to the world outside. So you spend the game essentially fighting your way out of the underworld. You finally make it, and guess who is there to stop you as a final boss from stepping outside at the last moment? Yes, it's dear old dad Hades. So then you have to fight dear old dad, and he beats you and sends you back to the beginning, and you have to fight all your way back up, and you do a little better against dear old dad, but then he beats you again, over and over and over. You fight until finally you beat him. His health bar has been drained. Now, I remember physically celebrating because of how hard this boss fight was. And in the midst of celebrating, I didn't see that I only half had beaten him. After you drain his health bar, suddenly it gets refilled. I had only gotten to the halfway point. There's a second part of the boss battle where he becomes even more fearsome. And he promptly beat me, and I had to start over again. The avoidant boss that we're kind of talking about in this analogy is kind of like that. You get through all the phases, you say all the right things, their health bar is drained, you think you have them only for it to completely recharge, and you have to enter the second part of the boss battle. Now, if the first part was about navigating triggers and creating breathing room and keeping engagement alive, the second battle is about rebuilding trust, and it's the real way to make progress. Just like Hades, draining half the boss health isn't enough. You have to face the deeper, more fearsome layer. And there's really only one way to win. You'll need to use micro trust deposits. John Gottman, the Godfather relationship researcher, defines trust as the repeated experience of a partner turning toward you instead of away. Now, for avoidance, they are taking the pressure and risk to turn toward you and hopefully discover you'll meet them with calm, patience, and consistency. That's when the emotional bank account grows. And to build this emotional bank account, as per Gottman's research, you will need to build trust through small, repeated moments that matter. For example, when an avoidant casually mentions feeling stressed about a meeting at work, I've got this big presentation later. Instead of trying to solve it or brushing it off, you respond with calm presence. I get why you feel that way. That sounds really stressful. That's a micro trust deposit, and their nervous system registers safe. Now, over time, as you respond like this constantly to small worries or disclosures, these repeated moments grow the emotional bank account and motivate them to feel positive about turning toward you. Other tiny deposits can be built by responding instead of reacting. If they send a vague text like, "Hey, I'm busy today," instead of spiraling or pressuring, you reply calmly, "No worries, hope it goes smoothly." You could do it by reflecting their feelings. When they vent about work or frustrations, mirror back, "Hey, that sounds like that was really frustrating." Simple, non-judgmental validation signals safety. Another way is following through on really tiny promises. If you say, "I'll send you that link," actually send them that link. Reliability in small matters signals reliability in big ones. One more is offering choices instead of pressure. I'd like to hang out. Do you want coffee or a walk? Giving autonomy reinforces control and reduces resistance. Now, each micro trust deposit is like chipping away at the second phase of the boss's health bar. One calm, consistent, validating moment at a time. Now, the avoidance defenses will start to lower, and you gradually move closer to the win that you've been building toward all along. Now, let's just say you do everything perfectly, though. You navigate the first phase of the boss fight using the cheat codes. Cool. You move through the second phase, carefully making these micro trust deposits, chipping away at those defenses. Trust is starting to rebuild. The emotional bank account is growing. You feel like you're finally winning. Awesome. But the boss shields aren't gone forever. That's just how avoidance works. The closer you get, the more they might tense up or retreat or test the limits of safety. Their defenses likely will flare again. The magic, though, is in the process. The more consistently you follow these cheat codes, that you stay calm, you're patient, present, you start making these micro trust deposits, the smaller and smaller those defensive flare-ups from that avoidant boss become. And over time, the avoidance triggers lose their power. The emotional bank account keeps growing, and the fight that once felt impossible starts to feel winnable. See, victory here isn't about defeating an avoidant boss once and for all. It's about playing the game skillfully, moment by moment, building trust, safety, connection, until those victories, however small at first, stack up and you realize you've created a relationship where turning toward each other feels safe again and again.